Hi, everybody. I think that we're going. Oh, there it is. Yeah, the indicator changed. Hi, everybody. We probably had a millennial pause there at the beginning of this meeting. Is it on? Tap, tap. It's July 24th, 2025, and this is the Backdrop Weekly Dev Meeting. We get together every week to talk about development priorities for Backdrop CMS. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet, and I'm the core committer, and technical lead for the Backdrop project. I'm joined here by a handful of other folks, and we'll do some quick round the room introductions. We'll start with Tim, and then we'll go to Martin.
Hi, I'm Tim, the St. Paul Tim on the internet in Deerwood, Minnesota. That's it.
Great, Martin, and then Jen.
Hi, I'm Martin Price, Yorkshire Pudding around the internet. I'm a backdrop developer in North East England.
Thanks, Jen, and then Izzy.
Jen Lampton, joining from Oakland, California, backdrop developer and other things.
Great, thanks, Jen, and finally Izzy.
Hi, I'm Izzy. I'm a developer in Vancouver, British Columbia, out on the West Coast, and I'm happy to be here with the Backdrop Group. Thanks.
Great, thank you, everybody. Oh, I just realized that my template or my agenda, I'd been editing the wrong document. So we have a number of great topics for today. The first of which, I feel like we should honor the tradition of people that put stuff into the forum post get their issues talked about. So, so we request that if people want to have an issue discussed during these meetings, that they go over to forum.backdropcms.org and post into the weekly meetings category the any requests that they might have for discussion. And so Izzy, who is here today, also. Oh, was it Izzy or was it you, Martin? Sorry. Asked about dbQuery versus dbSelect usage, and I started a document over on the doc site as well, just asking about this exact question.
Well, yeah, I've put an issue in the docs queue about the discussion. So, and Paderno's responded, but yeah, we've got the function doc in dbQuery where it gives a very simplistic thing. It says you mustn't use it for insert, update, or delete, but it does appear to be used extensively for those in both core and contrib, more in contrib and a little bit in core. Yeah, it's not particularly clear what defines a simple query and what in the issue, Paderno's made a good point that particularly where you're requesting nodes and there might be node access, that it's got to be the dbSelect because that's the only one where you'll get the thing. But he's also given other examples as well, so which I think makes a good start and will help as we perhaps look to improve the documentation.
Yeah, these examples are really excellent. He really seemed to encompass the scope of it really pretty well. Like this first example is really good, where it's like, if you find yourself doing any kind of concatenation, then dbSelect is probably better, because this kind of query assembly is prone to accidental SQL injection. And that's a good scenario. Like whenever you're doing this kind of thing, dbSelect is going to make it so that you're passing in all of your dynamic values as variables more consistently. And when you're assembling the query, you don't have to do it in a particular order. Also, like you don't have to make sure that this is all concatenated correctly. You can use, DB select, and you can add your conditions inside of different loops and if statements and separate from your where statements. And yeah, the order doesn't matter as much. And so it's much more robust, I guess, if you're using DB select in this kind of scenario. Yeah, that's exactly what he says. Um, this comment makes it clear why it's used. It also makes clear why it's highly discouraged. Uh, yeah, so all really good explanations in here. Does he specifically say node access near somewhere?
I thought he had.
I don't see it, but
Oh yeah, it's just where you were just up a bit. Yeah, so just below the cache example. So that's where he says there are other case. For example, if I want to get a list of nodes to which the currently logged in person has access.
Yep. And I wonder if DB select has better.
Yeah, in
No,
my
it
mind,
also is
all
remarkably.
of these are very DB select, DB insert, and DB update and delete are very poor in terms of their documentation and working, and then going and working, which is possibly why we see a lot more of DB query, because it's quite easy to use, whereas you have to dig quite a lot to find the documentation for how to build a DB select object.
Yep. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I've always found this to be the case that yeah, using DB select or even any of the other ones, DB update, DB delete, all of them are, for me, challenging to remember how to use and to write. And so, yeah, I absolutely agree that this would, like, it would be really wonderful if we could get this documentation, like, because a lot of our people, I mean, writing queries right now, it's driven entirely by, well, not entirely, but largely by Drupal documentation and people's previous experiences and the examples that we have, where it's like you go and find somewhere else in core and do what it does. I find that to be the case when I'm writing backdrop code, at least. And it would be great if we could make better documentation, and then if we could consistently link to it, because there's just so many functions and methods and classes related to the database abstraction layer that like it's hard to get all of that information interconnected. I like that we have this, related topic here. But this code or this documentation is that kind of documentation where this is like it's in code, and what this is this is the documentation that is provided by a group, a PHP doc group.
So we have copied across, I think it was RG Piano who did most of the work, the database API documentation pages, which are lower, but we've got a kind of very generic distinction between static and dynamic. And you say, well, what does it mean by static? Does that mean I can't have any placeholders? Or does it simply mean that it's just never, it can have placeholders, it's never going to change? And what about What about joins? What defines a static? So if you scroll down on the side menu, you'll see under Developer API, further down. There we go, Developer API, Database API. So this is what has been copied over, but backdropified mainly by RGPiano. But it just has a static and dynamic rather than. So I
wow.
think that
Yeah,
maybe this is where we need to expand it, and then maybe link to it from the different function documents or the group documents.
Yeah, this is funny that this got a big bold here. Static query, yeah. Dynamic queries.
Yeah, and it doesn't have any definitions of either. That's interesting.
Yeah, this is such a horrible explanation. Select queries may be either static or dynamic. Therefore, dynamic query generally refers to a dynamic select query. Real good explanation
The
there.
definition.
The dynamic is
by the
dynamic.
definition. Select is select.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to say is that dynamic queries mean selects,
Select
but
queries.
that's also like
Not
yeah,
necessarily true.
it's not even helpful really. I mean,
No.
yeah. Yeah. I imagine a bunch of this documentation, because this was copied over
Yeah.
from Drupal 7, from Drupal documentation, is that a lot of this documentation was written when the database abstraction layer was first introduced and really didn't get seriously updated ever since. And I think that the prevalence of, I mean, the amount that we know about the database abstraction layer now, and the number of people that know about it now versus they did at the time when it was first introduced. You know, we have different insights now that we didn't have back then of where is this thing going to be used? How frequently are you going to use, you know, DB query versus DB select? And I think that this documentation was built kind of forward looking for here's what we expect, but then it doesn't reflect the way it was actually used, you know, in practice. And so
I think we might also be able to use some like different terms now, whereas
Mm.
before we're just like theoretically dynamic, and now we're like, no, this means alterable. Like, you know, we have different words for that, where at the time, we didn't. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I always don't like it when my documentation follows this kind of thing where it's just like, here's a bunch of nitty gritty and like, okay, let's zoom all the way out and like, yeah. Be careful when
Yeah.
using the following methods with the multi-column dynamic query. Oh boy.
Yeah, it always takes me like 20 minutes to figure out how to get like an array of values. Where I'm just like, this is the easiest thing to do in Drupal 6, and it is nearly impossible in Drupal 7.
Yeah, this example also is
Not helpful.
it's kind of awful. Yeah.
Mm.
This is another I mean this is tangential and I apologize, but one of the things that makes the database abstraction layer so incredibly difficult for me is the use of magic methods like this, where the query object, this query is one defined by DB select, I'm imagining, or I assume. And then to get the query out of it, you need to cast it to a string. Or do what this one did, where it's just like call the magic method directly, which I just don't see this happening all that often. But what I think would make a ton of sense would be, like, let's look at, oh, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull up the DB database query or database select object easily. Yeah, because I don't even know what kind of object that is. Well, anyway, what I'm getting at here is that I think it would make things easier if there was a method on here just called like get query, for example. And then the toString function, we take everything that's in toString and we move it to get query. And then toString calls get query. And then there's a way for you to find and search for, like, how do I get the query of something without needing to know magically that you need to cast it to a string, that it's inside of the toString method. Because the number of times that I've looked around like trying to get the query out of an object, and I'm just like, how do you do it? Because it's totally magical that you cast it to a string, and that's the way you get the query out. I think that that kind of reduction of the use of magic methods would help a lot. There's similar problems with with query results, that when a query returns results back, you get a query results object, which again, you need to know that you can magically for each loop over the request over the result object, because we've implemented the magic methods for array iterators to make it so that you can loop over an object as though it were an array, even though it's not an array. Like things like that are just they're conceptually very hard to learn if you're not already familiar with them. And I think reducing that magic methods and making it so that we have ways of finding these things that are more discoverable would help quite a bit. And it'd also give us better places to document stuff. But yeah. So anyway, I think we've generally found that when it comes to writing documentation, the documentation that is written on the doc site that is editable is going to be of higher quality than
Mm,
the code that is written like that's not quite so accessible. Like when you have
yeah,
to edit this documentation for the database abstraction layer, this is what it looks like in code. Is it's in
yeah,
database.inc, which first of all, editing database.inc is going to be intimidating to just
mhm,
about everybody. And then the documentation is, written in PHP doc, which can be difficult to make sure that you get the syntax correct because you can't actually see it or preview it until after it's
yeah,
been committed. So one thing I think that we could do, first of all, that needs to be changed. Like I would not be opposed to basically deleting all of this. Then just say, hey, the documentation is actually over here
yeah,
where we have our editor friendly documentation.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to change this link out for sure to the equivalent for backdrop. All right, well, anyway, lots of things about database abstraction layer. There was definitely a time really early on in the backdrop project where I think I closed out the issue a couple years ago about like removing the database abstraction layer because it's it's a Drupalism or backdropism now that nobody outside of the ecosystem knows, and it's really obtuse. And also, we only support one database, type now. So some of the reasons for the abstraction layer have really been lessened. Well, anyway, do we have more that you want to talk about with DB query versus select, Martin?
No, I think that's been useful. I guess we just need to sort of understand how we sort of move forward in getting the documentation to be clearer, because it's and what do we need to put, and how do we structure it in order to improve it? I mean, and who writes it, because it needs to be. I just don't feel that I've got enough expertise to be able to write meaningful meaningful instruction on the difference and how to use the different ones. So it's how do we move forward on this? I think what Av Paderno's put is really helpful as kind of examples. I think we'll probably also need some practical examples on how to use on how to build DB select, DB insert, DB update, and DB delete queries.
Yeah, this whole section here, like even so from the landing page here, static queries, dynamic queries. Jeez. Is this a different page from this one? No. Oh, okay. Here is so we've got this page that's like the introduction to dynamic queries. And then static queries. Yeah, just even separating. I appreciate that this stuff has been copied over. Like, this is great. But yeah. Yeah, I understand your concern there, Martin. Like, we need people that are both, they both have an understanding of the systems and they have the ability to write eloquently about, you know, technically document things. And that's a hard intersection of people to find. Trying to see like how much content there is on each one of these things. Yeah, boy, bunches. All right, well, let's move on. We have other things to talk about, but boy, yeah, that's a rich topic there. I wanted to bring up this issue. HerbDuel opened this issue, pulled out of Zulip, and I appreciate that that he did this. And there's almost no activity on here yet, but the concept here is pretty straightforward, at least. So this is pulled or derivative or related to what's happening over here in Drupal, where in Drupal they want to replace the Ajax system with HTMX, which is a different JavaScript library for doing Ajax requests. And conceptually, the concept of HTMX is nice. Let me see if I can try to find the. Maybe I'm trying to find just an example. Okay, this will work, even though it's not a comprehensive example. But what it's doing here is it's adding HTML property or attributes. And so this is like, where should the Ajax request go to? It should go to /clicked. And then how should it swap out the concept that is, or the content that is returned. And so it's got a whole bunch of different HTML attributes like this. Let's see if I can find the list of attributes. Yeah, target, swap. But like you kind of can see even from these examples that this is like really similar to pound Ajax, in that you can specify, you know, what kind of thing triggers the action, where's it going to go, what's it going to do with the response, where's it going to target the response. And that's all very similar to our documentation for Form API. Or pound Ajax. So very similar, right? We've got path, we've got event, we've got other things like progress bars, callback, effect, event. Yeah, so like whether or not it's going to fade, or whether or not it's click, key press. Yeah, all of these things. And this is like super similar conceptually to what HTMX is doing. Only it's doing them all as HTML attributes, instead of what we're doing as Form API. And what this issue is about that Herbduel opened is they took out some of my comments from Zulip and said that we should do something similar. It would be beneficial to kind of get with the way that HTML and JavaScript interact with each other currently, as opposed to what we have been doing historically, which is when we specify these things in pound Ajax properties, they get added to the page as backdrop.settings values. And what it would be nice to do is to lessen the amount of stuff that we jam into backdrop.settings and instead start using HTML attributes for our Ajax properties. So when you specify pound Ajax on stuff, like on this button example, instead of jamming all of the values for how Ajax works into backdrop.settings, it would instead expand out these pound Ajax properties as attributes on the button itself. So that way, when you inspect the button, you could see from its HTML attributes that Ajax was enabled on it, what kind of thing it was going to do, and it would connect together the button and its behavior a lot more closely than what we're doing currently with backdrop settings. It also would make it easier to make it so that when you're returning new HTML onto the page, that the new HTML would contain the JavaScript behaviors rather than separately sending over the settings. Now we have to keep sending over the settings because this is the way everything's been built for decades already. So we're not really getting something that's easier, because we'll have to keep doing it the old way as well. But from a development perspective, it's going to be a lot more clear that the HTML attributes are controlling the behavior rather than hiding them away in backdrop settings. So anyway, but my summary here is that I think the concepts of HTMX are great, but I don't like the idea that, I mean, the way that Drupal is proceeding is that they're deprecating pound Ajax and going to replace it with pound HTMX in Form API, making it so that they need to convert everything from pound Ajax to pound HTMX, which is going to take decades, quite honestly. Like, it'll never end. And I think that what we can do instead is take the concepts of HTMX, start using HTML attributes, and apply that to the pound Ajax system and write it in a backwards compatible way. So I really like, yeah, I like the concept. I think we should adopt it. That's the short of it. But I don't think that we should actually switch libraries or break any APIs. So anyway, that's what I wanted to surface on this one, is that I think this is a great idea. It's also like kind of totally optional. But I like the concept. All right, then we had a number of issues that Izzy raised. This one, I looked at it recently. This is something that IndigoZella has been working on regarding views when you have a table that has certain sort orders on it. And the concept of this issue is that when you have a view, and let me just pull up, since I was on the doc site. Yeah, I'm just gonna look at the content listing. So when you have a view, you can specify that the view sort on multiple columns. So you could say like sort by the date first and then sort by title second. So if two things are published at the same time, that's pretty unlikely with second level granularity, but if two things are published at the same time, then it would sort alphabetically on the title second. But what ends up happening is as soon as you click on a different column, the other sort values are no longer respected. And so like, for example, on this anonymous, for sorting on name, anonymous is the same for all of this content. And what could happen here is it could be secondarily sorted by another column, like updated date or by title. But it's not. It's just kind of returning a random order, or most likely it's returning by like the node IDs, because or whatever order the data exists inside of the database table. And so this issue suggests that we add the ability to views to make it so that when you click sort something, it remembers what the other sorts are and then appends them. So if you had on this view sort by updated and then by title, when you sort by name, it would sort by name and then it would append the additional sorts on top of it to make it so that the remaining ordering wouldn't just be random. It would be sorted by the other sort criteria that was originally specified. So yeah, Izzy, you raised this issue. Is there something that you wanted to elaborate on or discuss it with this issue?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I was very delighted to find this issue was already there with a PR a month ago, even though this was created by Indoxella in September. And it came from a real live example of where we had a table with people's names in it. And then when we do a click sort, all of a sudden their names are no longer in order. And so that disrespecting the sort order in views just doesn't make sense. And it feels to me, or it seems to me, that this is really a bug that has existed for the entire life of views. And this is the first time someone has identified it and fixed it. So in a sense, I believe that it is the correct way to do it, and that all views tables should respect the existing sort order if you have one, and allow a click sort, but then append the other one. But it raises the question of what kind of problems will it create for people who have existing views if you all of a sudden make this a default edition. When I look back over my history, I realized that I didn't even realize that these kind of views were not behaving properly until I finally did. So it may turn out for a lot of other people that it just makes their table views behave more correctly. Mm-hmm. We still have to think about backward compatibility. And I think that's been the holdup. In some ways, the temptation to say, let's just make it the way it is. But as Indoxella says, she's really quite concerned about impact on backward compatibility.
Mhm.
I did write a draft change notice because even though it's not really an API change or a new feature, I felt this has enough of an impact. I put it in the chat, the link to the draft thing, just to kind of give people a sense of what this change is bringing about. So
Yeah,
that's
here's where it shows up in the UI. And yeah, I'm right there with you. Like that's the holdup is like, should this be the default? Well, should it be an option? Should it be the default? And uh, how do we maintain backwards compatibility? All of these things are the questions. And the current pull request as it is right now makes it an option. So it's right here. But it is not the default because the current behavior didn't have it, or the previous approach didn't support it at all. And so the way that Indigo Zealot maintained backwards compatibility is that she left this to default to false, and then all existing views adopt the default because all of the existing views have the value unspecified. And so when the views are loaded, they'll load in using the default value, which will be off because that's what it was before when it didn't exist. Yeah, it sounds like you might be on the same opinion as I am, Izzy, which is I think that this should be on by default because I think that it makes the views make a lot more sense. But I did think of a reason why it should be an option still, and that's that this does add some performance overhead of like adding multiple sorts, and sorting in particular is a way that SQL can really MySQL can really slow down if you start joining across a lot of different tables to do your sorts. And so there's some performance reason why you might not want this on if it wasn't particularly useful because it might have performance impacts. But yeah, I still think I'm right there with you that I think generally speaking, this makes views behave more the way that you would want them to. Uh,
is there any way for views to enable that when a view is enabled? Because there are some default views in core that are not enabled, and there may be default views in contrib modules that are not enabled. So if you know, again, if this were to somehow be become sort of the new normal, is there a way to do it instead of an update hook, to do it also as an enable when the views are enabled?
you mean like for contrib projects or?
Right, or even in the default, there are the two there, the recent comments and taxonomy terms. I mean, those would have to be updated, but you don't know if people have already enabled things on their site or not. I mean, how would you deal with those situations if you're doing it with an update hook?
Yeah, well, with an update hook, these, even though they're disabled, they're still in config. And so this like comments recent, for example, this is loading from the config file that's so if I go over to development configuration manager. So this comments recent actually still exists as a view already, even though it's disabled. So comments recent, here it is. And so it's just like, it's just has disabled equals true right here. And so it's actually in config. And so if we did do an update hook, it could update it even though it's disabled. But yeah, I think on new installations, what we could do is these config files that are in core, like I think that these are in the views module in the config directory of views. Like we could update these views in core so that on new installations of Backdrop, they could have that option turned on for all of the views that come out of the box. That would be one way that we could make it so that new sites going forward have a different behavior without an update hook. We would just update these default config files. Yeah, but I still kind of I would kind of prefer that I would prefer that all views going forward had that on by default if it was a table. I don't know, which means that we would have to have an update hook that updated all of the existing views and sets that value to false on all of our existing sites. And IndigoZella understandably is like shy about, you know, if you have a view or have a site that has 40 views on it, your update hook is going to update all 40 views. Actually, I guess that's not totally true. It'll only update them if they're using tables, but still, it could update like dozens of views on your site when you run an update hook. But that's not really that unusual. We do that for all kinds of different config updates when you need to update display mode or a content type. Like we often will loop over all of the config files and then update all of them in an update hook. So I don't think that that's really that unusual of an approach.
I think the concern is it going to change the behavior that the site is expecting?
You mean the end users? Like
Yeah.
they'll get an unusual behavior?
Yeah, they may have an improved an improved table, but maybe they've become used to or somehow desirous of the way the table appears, and now it's doing something a little different. And of course, the question about any contrib modules that have view tables.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I think that needs to be answered is what is the end user expectation? And is this new behavior in line with the end user expectation? Or is it like, is it like just the general question of like, is this an improvement and should it be the default? And let's put aside the technical challenges of making it the default and just decide if it is like, should it be the default? And if we can answer that, then I think that unless it's technically impossible to do, we should try to do what we think is the best thing for our end users. Because I think that it's technically possible. And I somewhere I can't remember where we have it. It's like in our philosophy, I think. Philosophy. Yeah, so somewhere in here we've got this. Oh shoot. Do you remember where it is, Jen? Of where we have the hierarchy of, you know, end users are the most important and then contrib and then core. Like this, there's this inverted pyramid of where our
I think it's
priorities
right
are.
there under values. Up.
Under?
At the top.
Where
Oh,
it
at the
says
top.
values, under values, right there. Architect over
Okay, I thought we had a
developer.
picture, but
Oh. We might have had one in one of our like presentations, but I don't think we had it on the
I think
website.
the pictures about PMC and core committers.
well, what, sorry, where is it?
Values, the whole value section.
Oh, but there's not a picture.
No. I think there's one in one of our presentations, but I don't think we've ever
Yeah, I
had
think
it on
that
the website.
must be what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's literally in our project, you know, that we should be focusing on our end users over us as developers. And so if this fits into that, and I don't want to say that I think that it does, but other people might not agree that you know, if we're thinking about our end users first, and this is what end users would expect or want, then we should overcome the technical problem with making it the default. On the other hand, we can make it the default separately. Like, we could make it the default later, because, either way, we're going to have to maintain backwards compatibility with current sites. We're not going to change the behavior of existing sites. Which means that if we decide to change the default later, that it doesn't matter when we make that change. Like, current sites will always maintain their current behavior regardless of how we proceed. And so, I mean, this could be like kicking the can down the road to make it so that people that care get what they want, and then nobody will care about changing the default later. But yeah, if somebody does care strongly, then they would be able to change the default at a later time.
And then,
So that's an
and-
option too.
and they would always have that option to turn it off if they have a reason to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it being an option, yeah, I mean, they can always turn it on or off. But you need to know that it's there. Like, I mean, that's really deep in the views configuration, that, you know, it's only on tables and the style information. It's only right here, and then this checkbox is where it needs to live. And that's really esoteric to find. But I mean, that's views for you. Everything is esoteric in views. Okay, well, let's see. Oh, we only have 2 minutes left. Boy, how the time flies. I don't really know if we have time to cover any of these other ones, especially because I know that we actually have a meeting after this one today, right, Tim? On
If I
documentation.
can be so bold as to just ask for a quick indulgence on 6936.
Okay.
It's a really simple one. And it was about people being able to find the way to knowing that there's more. There are modules in development that haven't yet been released that may have been ported. So when they come to install new modules, they can't find what they're looking for, and they may not be familiar enough with the Backdrop community to know that there's a whole lot more in the GitHub repositories. So this was to try and draw attention to that. And in the process of doing this, it became apparent that the installer browser is actually used for three things: the modules, the themes, and the layouts. And the themes and the layouts don't have that wealth of additional development stuff. But it made sense to add this help text wherever the installer browser was showing up. And so we now have this question as to, do we want it to show up on installing themes and installing layouts? Personally, I found that when you're installing layouts, having that help text and going to the GitHub repositories and doing a search for layouts, you become aware of several what are really modules that help enhance what you can do with layouts. So it does create an extra value added for people looking at what they can do with Backdrop.
Yeah, well, I like this new message better than what I saw in the screenshot. One thing that gives me pause
Well,
here.
that screenshot you're looking at isn't the current. That's the very first one.
Yeah, this is the current one. What's in the pull request here.
Yeah.
But one thing that causes me concern is that this help section, I guess it does say, like, okay, let's look at the actual. So this describes what the form actually does, the first paragraph. And I guess the second, okay, this is actually a lot better because it is a lot shorter now. So there's one sentence saying, here's what this form actually does, and then an additional sentence about it. Where I was going with this is I didn't like that, I didn't like burdening the user with like esoteric information rather than describing what the page was actually for. Where it's like, instead of describing here's how to use this thing, it's like, oh, but there's this exceptional weird thing that you might want to know about. Right, when users are primarily just concerned with installing stuff, but I totally get what you're saying, that there's a lot more projects that don't have official releases. Yeah, and it looks like a lot of other people had opinions on this, and so maybe I should read over this, because this is, yeah, I mean, it's got 50 comments probably total. So a lot of people have discussed this, and I haven't looked at it yet. So,
Izzy probably mentioned this, and it's come up a number of times, but recently this was triggered by someone who said they had looked at Backdrop, left because they couldn't find a module they needed. Come
mhm.
back months later only to find that module was always there, but it hadn't had a release, so.
Yeah, but I also, like, in another way, like, I don't want users going over to GitHub, to like find unreleased projects. It seems like even just recommending that is potentially problematic.
We do have different
Yeah, it's a
levels
lot
of unreleased projects. Sometimes it's just because people they want it to have extensive testing before they do a release.
Right.
Whereas others will say, "Oh, sorry, I'll release it, and people can report any bugs, and I'll fix them." So
And we also, like, if people are looking for specific modules, is that like a use case that is not, I have a Backdrop site and I'm using Project Installer? Like, is that I already know about this module because I was on Drupal 7? And maybe in that case, we should have some like different way to tell those people. I want to make sure we're not like solving a problem for one audience by adding a note for a different audience.
Yeah, that's the same concern I have.
There have been other solutions discussed. For example, listing modules on the modules page, but without like links if they're unreleased, or so there are other solutions to this. I think this was just one idea Izzy came up with that might help address the problem, but it's not comprehensive or the only
Yeah, I
solution.
think I would feel more comfortable if we started with solutions that weren't in core. Like if we can do whatever we need to do to backdropcms.org, do, just something there first, because putting a note in Backdrop core is going to affect everybody who's already using Backdrop and everybody who's going to use Backdrop in the future. And those might not be people who are looking for a specific module because they knew it was in Drupal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the longer we get from Drupal, like, time wise, the less value that's going to provide.
Yeah.
One of the
From-
things that we have done there that is not showing on your screen is we have changed it to Backdrop contrib repository. So we're not highlighting GitHub per se. But there are a lot of modules, whether you realize they were in Drupal 7 or not, that really do have a place and a use that may be usable. I mean, I've certainly found them. But then I'm quite comfortable with going to the Backdrop contrib repositories. But I can understand people coming new into this arena just wouldn't necessarily see that. So having the help right there when they're actually looking to add things to their site makes perfect sense to me.
But those are not the people you want to install a Drupal 7 module that'll crash their site and they won't be able to get out of it, right? Like, what we're trying to do by not having this on the modules page is prevent people from having their first experience with Backdrop be like, oh, I found a thing, I installed it, and Backdrop doesn't work. And I think that is more valuable than, making people go to backdropcms.org in order to find a module that may or may not work on their site. So I think that we should solve that problem for sure, but putting it in a place where it could be potentially negative impact is maybe less valuable than putting it someplace where it's like, I don't know, this is a place where you gather information. That's backdropcms.org. This is a place where you actively install things on your website, and this is in the installer. And one thing we could do is, if we get backdropcms.org working the way we want, put in the installer a note that just says there's more options on backdropcms.org, and then make them look there for information, right? So
Right.
this really just does remain the thing that installs your thing. And then if there are unsafe projects that people need to know about, they can go to backdropcms.org and find them there. That could be a good way to sort of get people from this interface to that listing without the possibility of them trying to install something that they shouldn't be installing.
Okay, this may be in agreement with what you just said, Jen, but like what I don't want to happen again is that we not do anything anywhere in hopes of getting the best solution in the best place, and then nobody gets helped ever.
Yeah.
So, right, anything we can do to just help people realize that there are other options.
Yeah.
At least in the interim would be helpful until we really get things fixed on the project browser.
Well, a change to backdropcms.org is easy, especially if just a text change.
Okay.
Adding all of the projects to backdropcms.org is supported right now. We just aren't doing it because it's a lot of work.
You're talking about like when we're going here, like
Yes.
improving this page.
Yes, not this page, but this page. Yeah.
No.
So if we had some text here that was like, there are additional modules in development
Mhm.
in our GitHub repository, and had that text on here, first of all, huge step forward, right? Second
Yes.
step would be like add stuff to the results that is not a module you can install right now. Right. And that I think would also be a huge benefit, like have all these be, you know, like project nodes without releases. And that's a little harder, but like we can still do the first thing right away. And then that way we've got now like a complete list on backdropcms.org of everything that's in any state of development. And then in core, we could be like, there's things that you can't use right now, go check this page for more. And that I think would be a much better experience for people, where we'd have all of the information where they can find it without needing to be a developer or go to GitHub. And we can drive people there from inside their own websites if we can. So let me look at this text that you've added here and see if that is something that we could put on backdropcms.org. Or if you think that could be modified in a way that would be a quick win. That's something I can do like right now. I'm working on backdropcms.org right now.
Yeah. Another like an obvious place would be this.
Yeah.
No results found. Like if you're looking
Ooh.
for something specific, this would be the perfect place to say, check out the full list, like
Yeah.
over on GitHub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would even be comfortable with that in core as the no results in core too. Like it's having something better than, you know,
No results.
you get nothing. Like,
Yeah.
hey, there's still hope. I would be okay with that because it's also not. It's not the first thing you see. It's only like when you didn't find something,
Yeah.
Right.
there's another option, and I would
Yeah.
be fine putting that in core too.
What was the text you just said, Nate? Check
I'm not sure.
GitHub
We can watch the recording.
okay. I'm like, wait, I didn't write it down.
I have no objection to seeing it on the backdropcms.org site, but I think for people when they're actually doing things, having it right there and immediately available so they can go look. It's still not easy to install an unreleased module through the installer. You have to do it with a manual install and the URL, but you can at least be aware of what it does and what it's like. So you could ask someone who's working with you if you don't know how to about installing.
But we can't do that until we have the information about those modules available, and that information we are currently getting from backdropcms.org. So I think we have to have the information on backdropcms.org before we can pull them into the project installer.
Yeah.
So I think this is just sort of like an order of operations thing. We're like, first, let's get it more text everywhere, right? Like this empty text, I think, is a great example in both places, and we could do that for core right away too. And then second step is let's get the information where people need it, and once it's on backdropcms.org, we can change the way project installer works to absorb not only modules from that have releases that you can click install now, but we could also put like lines on there for modules that don't have releases. But we need that to get it onto your backdrop site. We need it on backdropcms.org first anyway. So I think we're might be putting the cart before the horse a little bit here, just in terms of like our technical implementation too. In addition to like, yes, the best place to have it would be everywhere, but we have to get it there one step at a time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time.
The other thing I'd really like to encourage is that like projects should have releases. Like even if you're not like 100% on it, make it an alpha release, like I think that getting like having projects that have been ported for years but don't have releases but people are using, like we should get a release on them even if it's an alpha or a beta.
With restrictions, like if we made a alpha release of Commerce right now, it would like break your site immediately when you installed it. So just like,
Right.
like
Assuming
if
it
it's not
doesn't-
100% working, that's fine. But if it's like
see what you're
0%
saying.
working,
Yeah.
but people might still want to pick up on Commerce in whatever state it is and work on it as a developer. So it's still valuable to have information about it there, but maybe not the like installing. And it's hard for us to know too, like whether something's going to be safe or not. So yeah, I would encourage, same thing as Nate said, if your module is close enough, make a release.
Yeah.
But if it is absolutely not ready, then don't.
Yeah, because
Can I quote you and make a meme?
Close enough is good enough.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if from an end user perspective, like if a module doesn't have a release and it's not in Project Browser, like it doesn't exist. And
Right now.
in a way that's a fair assessment, because it's like if it's not ready for them, then they shouldn't be installing it, and so this split, or this concern of like, well, there's some people that are like, if it exists in a halfway working state, that's good enough for me. Like that's a smaller set of users I think that we should be concerned about than the users that just like, I just want to see what modules are available for me to install. And Project Browser is intended for users that really have less idea what they're doing. And so directing them to install unreleased modules, I feel like that's mismatching the audience of what this tool is for versus where we would be directing them.
I have seen quite often READMEs that have this is a partial port, and these are the things that aren't working yet. And this is sometimes that's with a link to an issue about that particular item. So, which I think is a fair way of doing it if you've ported the features that matter to you, but some features aren't there. It could be if it's there in the README that there are these issues still remaining, then that enables people to make an informed decision as to whether they can, if they're happy with what's available, then great, and if not, they can either leave it or they can contribute to getting those other issues over the line.
Okay.
Great. Oh my. Well, it's kind of funny because the meeting after this one is documentation, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we're kind of getting into all of that. Okay. Well, there's boy, we had so much to discuss. There's other issues I wanted to talk about, but I guess we'll just have to pick them up next week.
Yep.
That's fine. Yeah, but let's go ahead and wrap up the dev meeting for today. We've got docs right after this. So thank you everybody for joining. Thanks for the great questions, Izzy and Martin. And yeah, let's continue discussing online.
Yep.
So thanks everybody. I really appreciate